Hello, my friend. Allow me today, if you'll lend me your ear, to share with you a little bit from my personal devotion and my time with the Lord. I've been thinking about and meditating on that scene, if we can journey back to it, at the Last Supper, where Jesus is sitting at the table in the upper room with his disciples. And at the end of supper, Jesus announces to his disciples that one of them, sitting at that table, was going to betray him. Now, those of us who read the scriptures know that the betrayer, in fact, was Judas Iscariot, whom the Bible in one place called a thief, who kept the treasury and was a part of the 12. But what intrigues me about this narrative and this story and this historical account is that even though there was only one betrayer at the table, when Jesus said to them, "One of you is going to betray me," the scriptures help us to understand that each of them began to deliberate and inquire, asking, "Lord, is it I?" Now, what I found amazing is that whenever we start talking about touchy subjects or in any type of way offensive posture, by human nature, each of us tends to be tempted to identify ourselves personally as, if you will, exceptions. So, in other words, if somebody were to say in a general statement that there are so many deadbeat fathers, that our society is just filled with deadbeat fathers, then for a good father like me, or striving to be a good father, an active father like me, my tendency would be to rebuttal the statement suggesting that there's so many bad fathers, by saying, well, I'm a good father. And there's something about us that looks for, if you will, that escape clause or that caveat that suggests that we are the exception. But I want to suggest something to you today, and this is the principle of our conversation. The Holy Spirit helped me understand that just because there's an exception doesn't mean the rule is wrong. Just because there is an exception to the rule doesn't mean there is no rule. That in fact, you can have an exception to the rule, and maybe it is not you, or maybe it's not the next individual, but it doesn't mean that it's not anybody. In truth, there was only one Judas at that table who acted out betrayal. But I believe that a part of why there was a sense of unrest and deliberation at that table is because each of those 12 disciples, though 11 of them did not betray Jesus, the truth is any of them could have if they had fallen into the wrong place. And I raise this today primarily because we are living in times where racism and race tension has now come to the forefront. It has come to a boil as the result of systemic oppression and institutionalized systems that support and undergird a racist narrative in our country. Now, no matter where you fall on that scale, the reality is we can literally view with our own eyes the times we're living in. And unfortunately, I think some of us may be tempted to look for that clause that I was talking about. And when we begin addressing matters like racism or oppression or so many other forms of disparity in our life and in our culture, the temptation is going to be for each of us to say, "Oh, that's not me. I don't struggle with that. I don't have this issue. That's not my problem." And what I want to suggest today is, before we give ourselves the out, that even if you're not the problem, it doesn't mean the problem doesn't exist. And I want to tell you today that maybe we should do a little bit more like what the disciples did at that table, and at least be open to asking the Lord, "Lord, is it I? Lord, is there any way in which that I may be guilty of the thing that you are trying to eradicate? Lord, is there any way that I'm complicit, even if just through my silence, even if by trying to ignore the problems like they don't, as if they don't exist? Lord, maybe it's my attempt to shy away from it and to somehow use who my friends are, or who I'm related to, or who I'm married to, or where I go, or where I live as some out clause to not address the things that are happening around us. I want to tell you that real disciples are willing to at least ask themselves the question, even if in my heart of hearts I know that I don't fit the description. It's an openness to allowing God to examine my heart. And Lord, if there's anything in me that is unlike you, then I'm asking you to deal with that. And that's what I want to encourage you today with. And forgive my long rant today. This is longer than normal, but I think it's worth the time for each of us to sit at the table and to examine. Maybe I'm not Judas, but am I hanging around Judas? Is Judas at my table? Have I provided an opportunity to pacify Judas's behavior? And I'm asking you today to search your heart and ask that relevant question that the disciples in that upper room asked. Lord, is it I? Because just because I may be an exception to the rule doesn't mean there is no rule. And it doesn't mean that the rule is right. This is your moment of change.